My name's Mike, I play WoW, and today I'm going to teach you how to build a pool table for your Warcraft player house. This tutorial is going to cover the parts I used for the pool table in the Mangy Murloc, my tavern home, which is on screen now, things you could maybe swap out, and some general tips and tricks. If you like WoW housing or you want to learn how to make other pieces of custom furniture, please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. You can write whatever you want down there. You can write papaya for all I care. Every piece of engagement helps this channel grow. Let's play pool. Billiards? Pool. Let's say pool. Okay, I've teleported us to my workshop where I prototype stuff so we can go through what you're gonna need because there's a few different things. The first thing is some kind of table. Any table will really do. I've chosen the Hull and Home table from BFA. The top of the table doesn't matter that much because it's gonna get covered by other parts, so I picked this one because I like the base and legs on it. The remainder of the stuff you can get from the vendors in both Founders Point and Razorwind Shores with a single exception. The next thing you're gonna want is the Stormwind Hall rug. This is going to be the felt of your pool table. You'll want 6 structural beams. I use the Orgrimmar beams, but you could really pick any beam depending on what style of pool table you're making. For the Mangy Murloc, I wanted to keep it rustic, which is why I chose these ones. Next on the list is 6 wicker baskets. These are what we're going to use for the pockets of our pool table, along with some dye. The most plentiful item you're going to need is elegant seat cushions. You'll need 4 of these for every ball you want on the table. And finally, for your pool cues, you're going to want Gilnean pitchforks, one for every cue you want. I went with 4 personally, so I could rack a couple cues as well. These come from Cataclysm Blacksmithing, so you'll need some lumber and a blacksmith who's up to 60 in that expansion, or a good friend. Additionally worth noting, you'll need dye. 1 lush green for the felt, or whatever color you want the felt to be, 6 obsidian black for the holes, and then 4 of any given single dye for your solid pool balls, or 3 bone white and 1 dye of a chosen color to make a stripes ball. One thing to note before we start the actual build, I'm going to cover a bunch of the sizes that I use in this build, but it's really sized to the Hull and Home table. So just bear in mind that you may need to adjust depending on what changes you're making to any base component or general sizes. Okay, the first thing, and I'm just going to fake it in my workshop, is make sure you position the initial table where you want it. Blocking is an essential part of building any kind of custom piece that uses multiple objects. You want to avoid, whenever possible, having to move this thing later on, especially rotating it later on, because you'll have to touch up every piece. The pool table will end up very slightly longer and wider than your base table, but not by much, so use this first table placement as a golden opportunity to visualize the final product and decide right now where you want it. Let's assume this is where I want the pool table. If you really want to check, you can size down a couple beams right now and position them to see the size difference. On the Hull and Home table, we're going to use these to cover the corner pieces. I size them down to around 40% for that. The most important part of the pool table is next. You could honestly probably get the point across with just this. Let's move the rug onto this guy. I dye it lush green to get the green felt color for a pool table. You can dye it whatever color you want. You can dye it papaya for all I care. We're on part of the video, sorry. Anyways, once you've got it the color you want, put yourself in decorate mode, position the rug under the table, and center it as best you can. And once you've got it, pull it up so it's above the table. Resize it, I size mine to 70 here, and then line it up on the table itself. You can see here, because I turned my pool table, it doesn't line up nicely with the horizontal axes. I have to do some diagonal movement, or just grab the cube and free drag it. This will not drag it up, but will let you move it freely on the horizontal. You can save yourself some stress if you just line it up nicely to the axes, but you lose some of the lifelike feeling of positioning that way, in my opinion. Check your table from all sides to make sure it's lined up well, and then call the felt good. Next up is sizing your beams. Size your beams down to the right size and flip to decorate mode to place them on the table before you swap to advanced mode to drag it down and out. Play with this positioning so that it hides all the corners appropriately, and then use a time lapse to speed through placing all the other beams really fast, like this. When you get to merging the beams, my personal opinion is that the longest sides pushing it out looks the best, so pull those slightly out to hide the short side beams. Continue playing with all the beams. You may end up touching up their position slightly and maybe even tweaking sizing as you go. That's just part of the process. Once we finish the beams, give it a quick 360 around the table, touch up anything you don't like with those beams, and now that actually looks pretty good. This is starting to look like a pool table. The nice news too is that the rest of this is mostly straightforward. The pool table isn't actually a complicated build, but it looks really good. Grab your wicker baskets now for the holes. We aren't actually going to use the whole part of the basket because you'll lose the hole when you clip it. So dye each of these baskets obsidian black, size it. I size mine to 50% here. Rotate them 180 degrees so they're upside down, and then place them on the table. Again, I recommend decorate mode first to place and then sink the baskets into the table. I sink them all the way until I can't see them anymore, and then pull them up until it just pops through and stop. The important part here is consistency. Try to make sure your baskets are pulled up to the same height and are pushed into the side rails at the same level. Place the rest of your wicker baskets. I highly recommend placing the corners first and then place the middle pieces because you can use the corner pockets as well as the seam where the side beams connect as alignment points to get your side pockets squared up. Hilariously, I forgot to get more dye when I filmed this, so flash forward to when it's dyed and ready to go. With the holes done, the pool table is functionally finished. We don't have that much more to do. It's just adding balls and cues. The balls are probably the funniest and weirdest part of this build because there's no dyeable orb object really of any kind in the game right now. As a proxy, we're going to do some cushion wizardry that I'm going to show big to start and then do scale down on the table. Grab one of your cushions, rotate it 90 degrees so it's standing on its edge, take a second cushion, leave it in its default position, drag it over to the rotated cushion, and then use advanced placement to drag it so it has a middle intersectional cross with the initial cushion. Once you have that lined up, rotate a third cushion 45 degrees in one direction, pull it over to your cross, and align it so it fills in the angled corners of its corresponding area on said cross. Finally, do the same the other direction at the other 45-degree angle with your final cushion, line it up. And just like that, we have an orb. Sort of. A good enough orb. The nice thing about this ball is that when it's small, it looks just fine. So do the exact thing that you just watched me do on your pool table, but scale the cushions all the way down to 20% when you do it. When you set your initial vertical cushion, drag it down so it just barely clips the felt, and then align the rest to that. Tweak it as needed, and then dye the cushions as appropriate for the ball. If it's going to be solid, just dye it and you're done. If it's striped, dye 3 of the cushions white. I forgot to buy white dye, so I'm just using blue here. And then dye the 4th cushion the color you want the stripe to be. Then go in and slightly increase the size of the stripe cushion. Not much, just enough so that it clips over all the other sections of the other cushions to make sure the stripe is visible. Once you're done that, the last thing is to get your cues in. Pull your Gilnean pitchforks out. These don't really need to be resized in my opinion, but you could if you wanted to. Rotate them so they have a nice lean going on. Sink them into the floor so the pitchfork section is completely hidden, and then drag them over and lean them on the table. I recommend doing this with at least 2 cues on the table itself, and then any others you can just rack. With that, you're done. You've built the table. Congratulations on a really great piece of custom furniture. Going back to my real table, there's some stuff you can do to further hide the lines if you want to. Even though putting a mug on the table is faux pas in real life, you can do it here to hide intersectional lines. You can also customize it further. Filming the footage for this video, I quickly clipped a bookshelf in as an example to add a shelf below the table if you want. And then in a stroke of self-described brilliance, I shrunk this fence post down and stuck it on the table to represent a coin. A trick that turned out so good, I actually left it present on my table in the tavern. That's going to be it for today though. Hopefully you can take this tutorial and build your own pool table or some other cool game table that you want. If you use anything you learned here in something else, I would love to hear about it. So please reach out in the comments or on Blue Sky or Twitter so that I can see it. For now though, I'm going to go play WoW instead of just talking about it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Okay,